It's interesting because I recently reread Brideshead with a book club that I belong to here. My wife and I are in a couples book club, and uh, it was interesting reading the book for second time at an interval of about 10 years.
Hmm.
I actually didn't enjoy it as much as I had the first time. It,
Interesting.
it left me feeling a little bit melancholy, um, and I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the writing, and I love the novel. But I'm more and more convinced that Waugh's masterpiece is Sword of Honor, or maybe Helena, the novel that he
Right.
himself liked the best and that he used to read aloud to his kids. Uh, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But
Interesting. Yeah, I've only read Brideshead, and I read it after hearing all the hype, and I felt like it really lived up to
oh
the
yeah,
hype.
I mean
Uh,
it's a
you know,
masterpiece.
so it's my second favorite work of Catholic fiction next to The Lord of the Rings, which shows you, I mean, I think that's totally a legitimate choice, but at the same time, it might indicate the limitations of my, the scope of my reading. Um,
Far be it for me to to critique Brideshead, um, but yeah, it's an incredible novel. I mean, I love the. Um, I think it's often been interpreted as as a sort of recapitulation of the Platonic idea of the ladder of love, and I think that
hmm,
interpretation is really good. I
interesting.
love the beginning when Charles first visits Brideshead and he encounters that Baroque fountain, and he's drawing and painting, and he's sort of converted to the Baroque, and that's sort of the beginning of his conversion
Right.
to the church. It's sort of already happening without his even really quite realizing it. And then Sebastian becomes a sort of extension of that aesthetic sensibility, and the technical term that Waugh uses for Sebastian and then also for Julia is the term forerunner. Each is a sort of forerunner or a type of the next, and then Julia becomes, of course, the forerunner, as she herself is aware that she's merely a forerunner for something, for a
Hmm,
greater
right.
beauty and a greater good, which indeed proves to be true. And
Yeah.
so there is something, because I guess it's because there's in so many novels. I think this is typical of the novel as a genre in a way, and maybe it's more typical of the French novel, which I'm more familiar with. Uh, but there's a sense in which the main characters in novels, are often sort of they enter this world of illusion and deceit, and they get involved with people who are bad for them, and they strive to become members of clubs that seem to be rejecting them,
Right.
and then at the end of the novel, if they are to sort of make uh, some kind of progress, they have to reject the world somehow. And sort of this happens in Proust's great novel *In Search of Lost Time*, which would be my pick for the greatest novel of the 20th century, probably. Um, and it happens in so many 19th century French novels, Stendhal's *The Red and the Black*, uh, some of the novels of Balzac. Um, Flaubert's novel Madame Bovary ends with her suicide, obviously, but many people have pointed out that
I,
there's a
did, I didn't know that. You've
oh no,
spoiled
spoiler! Sorry.
it.
Well, I've saved you the trouble of maybe of reading it, but Flaubert had a kind of love-hate relationship with the world, right? He describes it with a kind of hateful love. He said his descriptions are just matchless in their beauty and their perfection and their
Hmm.
fidelity to reality, but there's also a kind of world-denying or world-negating uh, flavor or color to Flaubert's descriptions. And so the novel sometimes has this kind of um, world rejecting or world denying flavor to it. And it says that you have to pass through this sort of world of illusion, and then you can reject that, and then the novel ends. But Brideshead is unique in that instead of seeing the world as this kind of hall of mirrors that you have to find your way out of, the world becomes this sort of forest of symbols, as or kind of these. It gives you these kind of these signs, which are incomplete, but which are always sort of pointing beyond themselves to something that's a little bit better. But in themselves, they are already good. The Baroque fountain is already in a sense, it reflects the beauty of God and the beauty of the church. And the same is true of Sebastian, and then even more true of Julia, because
Right.
he again paints the fountain, but this time he's painting Julia, and so a human figure has entered the picture, And so I think that's what one of the things that's so wonderful about Waugh's novel, and maybe about the British Catholic novel in general. I think the Lord of the Rings, and you've had some very interesting tweets about this, and I've discussed this with some other people. Is it the greatest work of literature of the 20th century? Is it the greatest work of art of the 20th century? It's very hard to compare that book to anything else, but I think you can compare it to Brideshead in a way, in that um, uh, the characters sort of there's a sense in which you always feel that the world is good and that creation is good, and that you want to be in this world that Tolkien has created. It's not a world that you feel the characters should leave. It's a world that's radically threatened by evil, but it's not intrinsically corrupt the way, say, the 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 aristocratic salons in Proust's novel sometimes seem to be, just to places of complete nothingness.